So is it going to replace jobs? I think it's going to change jobs, right? And I think it's going to make consulting, for example, able to solve problems that they otherwise would not have been able to. But I don't think it's going to be the traditional consulting that you see today.
All that and more on today's Mixture of Experts. I'm Tim Hwang, and welcome to Mixture of Experts. Each week, MOE brings together a group of brilliant minds working at the very cutting edge to debate, discuss, and guide you through the week's news in artificial intelligence. On this week's episode, we've got Kush Varshney, IBM Fellow, Aaron Baughman, IBM Fellow and Master Inventor, and we're going to be joined in just a bit by Dustin Haywood, aka Evil Mog, who is the X-Force Executive Managing Hacker and Senior Technical Staff Member. After the panel, we'll also have a special segment with Briana Frank, Vice President of Product and Design Cloud Platform. We've got three big stories that we're going to talk about in a panel today. We're going to talk a little bit about OpenAI launching a new thing called the Deployment Company. We're going to talk about Google's disclosure of some very interesting 0 days driven by AI. Kush, actually, because you're on the show, we actually want to focus first on some research, which we haven't done in a while. And I actually want to get our show back to talking about papers. And it's a really interesting paper called MELLEA, which focuses on a problem that we've talked about at MOE from time to time, which is that, in the OpenClaw era and in the agent era, skills are really the building block of how these kind of agents operate. And needless to say, the skills ecosystem is pretty scary right now. Kush, I don't know if you want to kind of intro the paper and, sort of what you guys are trying to solve, but it feels like a big part of it is dealing with that security issue in skills.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so MELLEA is this thing, this effort at IBM Research. It's trying to take these ideas of generative computing forward. So computing itself, there's lots of ways you can do computing. We have maybe talked a little bit in the past about quantum computing. Classical computing is what everyone is familiar with, and generative computing is thinking about what is AI bringing forward with these LLMs and everything else as just another additional component to whatever else is still in computing. So that includes all the other stuff that helps us be safe, secure, efficient, abstracted, and all sorts of things like that. So a lot of my colleagues at IBM Research have been working on this paradigm called MELLEA. So it's basically the idea that if you are going to have something to do like a program, right? Can you write it with regular code, first of all, do most of the things deterministically, and then only when you need to call a generative slot. So kind of call an LLM in those little places. And what are regular code good for is control flow, all sorts of different things. And then use the generative thing just where it's good for, which is dealing with context and composing things and so forth. So the new idea that we've been working on recently is actually inspired by my appearances on the show, right? So stuff we've talked about was part of the thinking that went into it. And it's that, like you said, with OpenClaw, with all sorts of other sort of agents out there, the skills marketplaces are full of all sorts of weirdness, badness, things like that. So how can you kind of process those skills to make them more reliable, safer, more efficient, and with less contradictions and so forth? So what we've been working out is a methodology and a pipeline for taking a skills.md file and processing it. We're calling MELLEA-fying it. So making it into a structured program, a Python program. And really just, again, calling this small LLMs when you need them in that program. And then the program is the skill. And then you can run it using additional, different harnesses. You can just call the Python program from the command line if you want, but and so forth. And then we do a bunch of safety checks, security checks. We add these extra guardian sort of hooks into the program itself in order to make sure that when it's being run, it's also being safeguarded. So that's kind of the idea, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think it can be pretty valuable to bring some order to this the claw havoc that we're in. So
yeah, the crazy situation we're in. I mean, Kush, I think what's so fascinating is you're not saying it in so many words, but it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
the future of skills
Mm-hmm.
might be programs.
Yeah.
Like you're almost kind of going in the reverse direction where,
Yeah.
I think like the dream was, oh, hey, skills, they're going to be this kind of very open-ended,
Mm-hmm.
almost like narrative document. And almost
Yeah.
you're saying is like, in order to ensure security, we have to
Mm-hmm.
make them deterministic again. Is that right?
Yeah, the narrative is good for a lot of things, right? It makes life easier for the people putting them together. But then, like we think of this as a compiler, so we call it the MELLEA skills compiler, and just like in any other compiler, I mean, you make things easier for the programmer, for the person putting the thing together, but then. In the back end, you compile it into something that's hardened, that's more robust, more efficient, and so forth. So we don't want to lose out on the fact that for authoring, natural language is a good medium, but then for enterprise deployment, you do want to compile things into something more solid, and that is a program, and specifically a MELLEA program.
Aaron, maybe I can bring you into this discussion. I mean, when you've been on the show, you've talked a lot about how you all are using kind of agents in the field and, teaming up with folks like the Masters and, kind of the US Open. Um, how do you in your practice right now deal with the uncertainty around skills? Like just to give our listeners a sense of like how it happens today, even in your own projects, are you manually reviewing skills? Do you not use skills at all because of the security issue? I'm just sort of interested in kind of how we translate what's happening in Mellia here to like sort of the problems that people are having on the ground.
Yeah, I think this is a really very powerful and a great idea, right? Where the industry's moving towards these prompts as code, because it creates these agent skills that can be reused, right? It creates type prompts, compiler validation. You can port these agent behaviors across to a different other agents and create these digital workers, right? And they're very declarative, right, on the orchestration layer. And and whenever we're in the field and we're looking at creating these types, right, of areas, we do have agent cards, right? And in the card it describes all the skills that it has. You could think of an agent as a node, but it shows how all the nodes are connected together. But each one of those particular agents, they have different prompts that tell it what to do. Right. So if our agent workflow or our agentic system is following a particular flow, right? It could be or a pattern. It could be like the critic patterns. So for example, if we have one agent that's creating content, and then we have a judge agent that's judging on different dimensions on how it's doing. Each one of those agents has its own prompt, but it does get very chaotic, right? Because the prompts change. It's hard to version them. It's hard to know to make sure that if we add in a certain instruction within the prompt or a rule set, does it help or hurt, right? But being able to compile this skill, right, and put it into a library, such that it's already have a schema validation check. We make sure that it's the tools that it's going to use is safe. So for example, we don't want to constantly hit an origins server at a really high scale, right? We want to make sure it's protected by CDN, for example, right? It makes it for a very nice, almost like a plug and play, piece, right? So I for one am very excited about it, right? And it also gives us more of a predictable multi-step behavior in a sense. And because our team is quite large, right, and other teams are too, that create these prompts, and it just makes it much more manageable, right, to ensure that what we're doing is correct. And it also helps to protect against prompt injection or instruction hacking as well. Since it is as code and it's already verifiable, right? You have sort of this implicit trust so that you're not also doing this tool over permissioning aspect, right? So this concept of a skill, I think, is great, and I'm looking forward to really using it more. One other point too is that we use A2A, and I know Mellia, it doesn't depend on A2A, but it is compatible for it, so it's very agnostic as protocols emerge.
Well, Kush, where does this work all go next? I mean, I think like is everything going to go back to being normal programs again, or like where do
Yeah.
we expand this kind of work?
Yeah, no, I think this idea of generative computing is taking us forward in the sense of, uh, I mean, again, like I was saying before, like use everything we've learned over whatever 80 plus years of computer science and kind of do things in the right way. So like this is a compiler. You can have operating systems for generative sort of tasks and so forth. You can have all sorts of things, right? And so I think that's the sequence is go back to your computer engineering textbook and see like what changes, what stays the same, and kind of use the generative sort of module that we now have in the best possible way.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, on the gen compute side, we're looking at having agents automatically auto create prompts, right? And the auto creation of prompt, if you can inject Mellia in, to compile it, right, to do the validation of the prompt automatically, in this flow, I think that really helps to increase the trust. Both from a security perspective, but also from you could think of it like an idempotent, aspect, but making sure that the results, right, that are coming back and being pushed, as a persona to another agent is really what you intend. So it's a nice building block, I think.
Well, Kush, if folks want to play around with some of what you built, read the paper, where's the best place to find it?
Yeah, they can go to MELLEA.ai. That'll introduce them to the overall project, and then within the GitHub, there's the MELLEA skills compiler as well.
Well, cool. We'll definitely have to have you back on here. I feel like the skills security question is just this enormous one. And so more to come on this front. I'm going to move us on to the kind of second story that we were going to cover this week. A really interesting story. OpenAI has announced that they're going to be launching a new enterprise called the Deployment Company. And what's so interesting about it is basically the Deployment Company is it's a consulting business. It's a services business where they will work with large enterprises that want to integrate AI and help them with that integration. So this is really interesting to me, at least. Aaron, if you believe in the dreams of artificial superintelligence, all the consultants are doomed, right? You just plug the AI and it will solve all the problems. But here, of course, one of the biggest, arguably, AGI superintelligence labs in the world is turning around and saying, we're going to put a lot of money into services and integration as a way of ensuring that enterprises can get the full value out of the technology. So what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, so I read some papers, I was doing some research and I was scratching my head at first. I was curious as, how is OpenAI going to be able to focus on non-OpenAI models, right? Because if you're a pure consultancy, place and you're trying to help enterprises, generally the enterprises has to look at multiple foundation stacks. All the way from the intelligence layer down to the the infrastructure layer, right? And each customer has their own piece, right? And so then I was asking myself, well, what is OpenAI going to focus in on? And so large companies today, like a lot of what we do at IBM, we help them focus on potentially foundation models, but we look across, stacks. We look at, granite type models, but we also, look at what's over on Bedrock, for example, and we mix the models together that aren't necessarily our own, but we meet the customer where they need to be met to help them produce, a solution for their use case. And they already have internal machine learning systems, existing cloud stacks. They might even have specialized models that they have distilled. So it's outside the realm of these open AI models. But I think what the likely operating model here is going to be is that OpenAI, with this new company, that the primary intelligence layer that they're going to push, of course, is going to be OpenAI models, right? But they're going to have supplementary tooling, or they're going to need to support things like Google, Anthropic, open source pieces. And then down on the infrastructure play, they're going to also have to look at other pieces like AWS, Azure, Snowflake, and so on. And I think this is supported because I was looking at some of the partners that they have signed up. I mean, I think they're at like a $10 billion valuation already, right? I mean, it's quite high. But from what I could find, it looked like McKinsey, Capgemini, Bain and Company, right? That they're going to be partnering with OpenAI, which tends for me to think that they're going to be looking at the entire ecosystem right around this AI piece, right? But it's going to be neat, and I don't think it's hype, right? Because enterprises genuinely they really need AI integration. I think that's where lots of this is, but part of it. I think what is hype is that AI transformation right? It's sort of being marketed right ahead of the operational reality at the moment. Look at the numbers that there's only about a third of companies are scaling AI across the enterprise, right? Which means that some of these points are overhyped, but there's a real need, right, to help the other two-thirds of companies sort of get there and fill in the gap.
Kush, last week we were at Think, and the episode that we did there ended up focusing a lot on sort of like that the technology is almost like 50% of the story, 10% of the story, and how much just goes into like getting these enterprises to really get all the benefit is this like enormous kind of change management problem. I mean, here's a weird hypothesis. Does it turn out the deployment company becomes like a really major business for OpenAI? And does that also introduce its own risks, right? Because to Aaron, to your point, right? Like OpenAI obviously has an interest in what model you use when an enterprise goes to use this stuff. So I'm kind of curious, maybe the short question here is like how bullish you are on this strategy and whether or not it becomes really a major part of OpenAI's business.
Yeah, no, I think the strategy makes it such that our CEO Arvind is like almost prescient, right? I mean, he's been talking about how models are getting commoditized and everything, and really the integration part is where the business opportunity is. So, given that OpenAI is, I mean, launching this consulting business, I was also reading. I think Anthropic has some joint venture that they announced last week as well that is along the same lines, right? So the models aren't the business in some sense, right? I mean, that's one of the points. It's the integration, the consulting, everything that goes along with it is the business. And then to your point of the risk, right? I think the way we're setting up, I mean, IBM Consulting and everything IBM is setting up our sort of worldview is on this sovereignty sort of point that Aaron was talking about, which is meet the customer, do what's best for them, whatever model it happens to be, whatever's right for them, right? And like having this like opinionated, like strong opinion that we have to use these models is maybe not the right sort of answer for most clients, for businesses and so forth.
Yeah, it almost kind of feels like we've like very quickly moved from the first question was, oh, is AI going to be a consumer business or an enterprise business? And lo and behold, maybe a month or two ago, we heard rumors that OpenAI was saying, okay, we're going to focus on enterprise like Anthropic. And then now it kind of feels like almost like the competition's like moving again. It's like going from like, oh, we're going to be enterprise, but we're going to do enterprise consulting. That's actually where like the business is. It'll be so interesting, I think, to see this competition evolve. Aaron, maybe like a final kind of cheeky question here is we talk a lot about like future of work on MOE. What's AI going to replace? What's it not going to replace? Um, is like, does it turn out that like McKinsey or like, or like consulting businesses as a whole, is that the most AI robust profession to get into now? Like I like it's kind of an interesting outcome, but is maybe suggested by what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating with what's happening, right? I think what you're going to see is the merging of software and consulting, right? Where you'll see lots of different virtual workers that have certain skills, right? And then they're going to learn domains, and maybe they'll be badged, right? So you might have on the tech side, you might have a worker that's certified in Java or certified in Python, certified in Lisp. But then on the domain side, you also might have other domain virtual workers that are certified in, let's say, comms. They could be certified in finance. They could be a CPA even, right? But the certs that used to be human are now going to be both human and virtual workers, right? And these virtual workers are composed of these agents that have these skills that are now verifiable and trackable, right? And so I think it's going to be a combination of I'll just call it software, but software and humans now merged and working together in an accelerated way to help solve some complex problems that we ordinarily would not have been able to do, right? So is it going to replace jobs? I think it's going to change jobs, right? And I think it's going to make consulting, for example, able to solve problems that they otherwise would not have been able to. But I don't think it's going to be the traditional consulting that you see today. So next 1 year, 2 years, right? You're going to see lots of these different aspects show up. But it's uh, But it's gonna be fun, as a techie. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, the coming battle, I think, is because I think what you're saying is that like there'll be lots of different models for doing consulting. So I think that's what we're about to see work out, right? It's like how much like the tech-enabled consulting will be beneficial, how much, kind of this sort of like semi-vertical integration between the model provider and consulting will work out. It'll be a real kind of like free-for-all for a bit, which will be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. And I wonder, as some of these forward deployed engineers, that OpenAI is pushing forward, it'd be neat to do some research, and it could be out there already. But are they equipped with these virtual agents, or these workers to help them out? Right? Is this sort of like the beginning of this symbiotic relationship of AI and humans consulting together? Because 150 isn't a lot, right? So I mean, that's just a start. So to me, I wonder, are they being forced, amplified with these AI tools, or these super intelligence, and that's what they're using, and they're marketing that process, right? And they're, and in effect, using their own OpenAI models as their virtual workers, but yet they're able to work and meet the customer where they are in the models that they're using.
All right, so let's get to talking about this super interesting zero-day story coming out of Google this week. To kind of navigate this news, we've got Dustin Haywood joining us. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. I really wanted to kind of take a specific angle. So the story that came out this week, if you didn't see it, is Google disclosed that they had discovered a zero-day, not too surprising of a discovery. But the main thing that they kind of appended to this story was that they appear to have evidence that AI was used to both kind of discover and leverage the exploit. And I think it was just such an interesting story, particularly on the wake of all of the kind of anxiety that has been inspired around the Mythos announcement from Anthropic. And here the idea is that Mythos's next generation of model is sort of so performant, particularly against cybersecurity, that we have to avoid launching it, and we need to make all these patches, in fact, before they launch it, to avoid the cybersecurity risk. And so I guess, Dustin, maybe a quick question for you. I'm shaking, like kind of scratching my head over here, because I think on one hand, it feels like good that Anthropic's being responsible about the launch. On the other one, it just seems like, AI is already being used to identify all these exploits. And so I guess kind of question is like, is the game kind of already lost here? Like, are we already living in AI, cybersecurity nightmare world? And what should we make of this news from Google?
So, I mean, honestly, we're already seeing this been ramping up. The first talk of AI finding 0 days was actually at the Unprompted conference in San Francisco back in March. Anthropic was using Opus 4.6 to go find these vulnerabilities. The real difference is Mythos is good at chaining together multiple steps in an exploit, but in terms of raw 0 day, all you need is any open source model or open weight model and go file by file. We're already seeing a number of things from copy fail, dirty frag. There was a PHP vulnerability that just released. There's a number of these vulnerabilities coming out. So much so that our X-Force offensive research team has coined this patchpocalypse, because as these bugs are coming out, they're getting patched basically immediately. So some of these bugs have been around for 10 years or longer. It's just we're finding them now. That's all the real difference is. But the step difference in Mythos, and this is why they're not releasing it, I mean, OpenAI has their own version and everyone's all building their own agentic pieces, is it can now chain together, let's call it 10, 20, 30 steps together to go through, say, a long penetration test. But in terms of the actual 0 days, the threats are already out there. So it's just a matter of time. There was actually a clock that was released, and I can't find where the site is. I saw it 2 months ago. It was like the Mythos countdown clock, where they compared the open weight models and the commercial models to how fast they've caught up to Mythos. And at the time, this is again a month or two ago, they said 228 days until the models keep up. And this comes from the fact that we've got an exponential growth in AI capabilities. So
Okay. All right. Well, it's very anxiety-inducing. I was hoping that you'd say something that would be good news. I suppose.
Well, there is good news. There's
okay.
Very
well, what
good
is
news.
the good news? Yeah.
So the good news is AI is also really good at verifying the patches and finding these vulnerabilities so we can fix them before they were there. Like, these bugs were there for ages. It's just now they're being found. So a problem named is a problem solved. So we're now accelerating and fixing these bugs before they get into production, or at least within, a reasonable period of time afterwards, rather than sitting there for 9 months being undiscovered by people hoarding them. So it's killing the exploit broker game a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Kush, do you want to talk a little bit about like where we land? Particularly with Dustin's analysis here, it kind of feels like maybe we're just kind of at parity, right? Like as kind of like T approaches the maybe not infinity, but like a midterm. The kind of balance between offense and defense seems like it might kind of even out. Do you buy that?
Yeah, to me, I think that is exactly the point, right? I mean, to me, this story isn't really a story. It's like a whatever dog bites man sort of story rather than man bites dog in a way. Because, I mean, if the story was whatever, like a 10th grader uses AI to do their homework, or one of the mixture of experts uses AI to help them prepare for the episode, like that's not news, right? So, like, I mean, yes, these AI tools are around, and people are using them for bad or for good, and I think the balance is there. I think there's no like particular like weight towards one side or the other, and I think that's actually a good thing. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Of course, I mean, having more advantage to the defenders would have been good, but I think we're kind of in that equal sort of setting.
Yeah, and I guess Dustin, I put some words in your mouth. I don't know if that's what you
No,
would
it's all
agree
good.
with Kush.
There's
that,
actually
like,
funny
kind of,
part
yeah.
is there's actually an advantage right now. So when attackers attack a network, especially say a nation state or an advanced adversary, they used to go very, very slowly. It took 9 months to get in and stay there. Nowadays, all these new AI tools are operating at lightning speed, which means they're very easy to detect. So in that regard, all these attacks are, being slammed down extremely fast, which leaves detection signatures. It's a bonus for all of us as defenders.
Aaron, Chris just a moment ago was like, this is in some ways kind of like a non-story. And I think, Dustin, I think you opened by saying, look, we've known that like this can happen for a really long time. I don't know, Aaron, like for this Google story and I guess subsequent stories, should we kind of just eye roll now? Like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, of course. It's almost like saying you found a cybersecurity vulnerability by using a computer. Like, of course you're using AI to do it now. Like, this is just no longer a new thing.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts come to mind. First, what's happening in the field is that good enough matters more than the best, right? So if you have a good enough model that's available, then sure, you can come up and, create some generative AI type code, as long as it works, right? Then, it surely can, help the offensive attack, so that seesaw, offense versus defense, offense, has, the advantage. But over time, it's beginning to flatten out where it's even. It'll constantly go back and forth, back and forth. That's just the nature of this elasticity between offense and defense, right? But I think the real debate isn't about should we release frontier models, right? Is it really going to help offense or defense? I think the real debate is what are the policy trade-offs that must be made in order to accelerate defensive capabilities, because these companies and AI capability, they are going to be released, whether we want them or not. They're going to be leaked. Employees are going to leave companies that have the skills that then can go build their own and open weight it, right? Smaller models are going to become more powerful in certain domains, and these large frontier models as well, right? So I think that's the debate, right? Is how can we release these types of frontier models, yeah, in a framework such that the defensive posture can accelerate faster than the offensive posture can, because broad innovation is going to happen. Research papers are going to be released. People are going to be building and taking models, right, and releasing them. So it's like this slow diffusion, right? That's going to happen, but that's sort of top of mind right now. But I think we live in an exciting time, and there's lots of opportunity for both offense and defense to get that equilibrium, right? That's healthy.
That's right. Well, Dustin, maybe like there's a final angle I want to touch on for this story, which is obviously right now we're all very focused on like the 0 day, the technical exploit, all these sorts of things. The normal adage, right, in computer security as well, it's ultimately social engineering that gets you in the end. And I'm really interested in whether or not you think that like, these models which have been so good at, say, finding vulnerabilities in computer systems, eventually will have really good, well, good is the wrong word, really scary applications, I would say, in these other parts of computer security, like social engineering? Like, is there a bunch of kind of cognitive vulnerabilities you think that like there will be a mythos scale event around, or is that not really the right way to think about
Oh,
this?
that's actually the way it started with was AI was like, if you look at, say, social engineering, it used to have
Mm.
the Nigerian prince here to go sell
Yes.
you a car somewhere in, wherever.
$1 million
And
for
$1
your
million,
social
they
security
had
number. Yeah.
typos everywhere, and that was the issue. Now, like, they've got automatic tone matching, deep fakes are a big thing. So, like, that came first, then the vulnerabilities came second. The cool part I want to bring up, though, is there's this conference called Pwn to Own Berlin, where basically all the hackers come together, they bring their best 0 days. And in previous years, they've had no problem fitting everyone in. This year, they had to turn away so many people because there was like 300-400 people that all submitted, and they didn't have enough time to fit everyone on the schedule. And with the number of patches that vendors are pushing out rapidly because they've got their own code scanning happening with Mythos, it actually shut down half of the people who are submitting to this Pwn to Own. And so there's this whole big uproar going on right now. So AI is definitely playing a factor, and it's stopping things before it comes out. My key thing is most companies can't even patch when a patch gets released. So why am I worried about 0 days when I've got these 1 days or 15 days, 30 days that have
100
been out for a
days.
while, right? Like between Copyfail and Dirty Frag, the bugs all came out, patches came out. But am I gonna be able to get that system patched within 30 days in regulated environments? Like this is the part that's hard. So we just need to adapt the industry to things moving faster. That's the only real difference.
Well, Dustin, that's all the time that we have for today, but this is great having you on the show, and we'll have to have you back very soon. And Aaron, Kush, thanks for joining the show today. You're some of my favorite guests to have on, and we'll have you back on real soon. All right. Well, we've got Brianna Frank joining us, who's the Vice President of Product and Design for Cloud Platform. Brianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's just start with Red Hat. I think, hear the crowd a little bit in the background. You're there right now. Obviously, one of the big conferences of the year for the space. I'm curious about what trends you're noticing on the ground, what you're seeing, and what you think about where it takes us going forwards.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting because the tagline is all about what's next. And I do think that when you talk about AI, a lot of conferences, everyone's talking about like this new gadget or this new technique but a lot of the folks here are thinking more holistically. Like AI is already here. They're not really thinking about how to do a POC or even how to get the first AI application into production. It's more about how do you scale and how do you solve those really harder enterprise problems? How do you secure AI? How do you put guardrails in place? How do you have consistent architecture on-prem and in the cloud? How do you handle when models upgrade and you're using an older model that might break your app? Like all
Mhm.
these kinds of more enterprise nuanced
Yeah, we're
things
like in
that
the
are
real
really
world now.
real world, and everyone's more of a practitioner. They've already embraced AI. There's really no one here that I've run into that's afraid of, AI. They're really embracing it and saying, they're excited really about what's possible and what's next.
Well, and so it sounds like, there's a lot of kind of like just very practical struggles people are dealing with here. It's just about like when do you switch models in and out and kind of the administration. We were just talking with the panelists before you joined about how, it's kind of funny. It feels like in the last few months, Anthropic and OpenAI have suddenly signaled that they're really going to get into the kind of consulting business. And I'm kind of wondering like how much of this, we're now almost entering like a kind of consulting integration phase for the technology, where a lot of the work now is just like, how do you steer your big company to actually benefit from this technology? Do you agree with that?
I do. It's interesting because I ran into a former colleague who had retired and we'd worked together years ago and he came back into the business as a consultant for another company. And he's just so excited because transformation is really something that excited him. And he was telling me about the kinds of things he's doing. And I do think that in order to really unleash the benefits of AI, there is a transformation that's needed. And I think what's fascinating is a lot of it has to do with behavior first before the technology. And we have to change the way that we are working. We might have to document more things. We might have to be more transparent and, have less meetings where we're kind of talking to each other, not documenting unless the AI is documenting it for us.
With
So
us,
it's
yeah.
right. So it's changing the way that we're interacting. And I think that's the first step is changing our behavior so that you can then apply an agent to your workflow But I think that's what's fascinating. And I do think that a lot of companies are going to need help because individuals are on there's a scale, and some folks are just starting their AI journey, and some folks are just all in and they're doing incredible things and they're, on the weekends, just for fun. But, not everybody's in the same space. And so I do think that consultants coming in and like really helping companies change the culture, because I think it is a culture problem first. And then you start, applying different tools and processes. And but it kind of starts with the curiosity and the willing to learn and maybe the willing to change how you've been doing things.
Well, I know I would be remiss to not mention, it sounds like IBM's got some big announcements for this year's Red Hat. So if you want to tell our listeners about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had two really big announcements yesterday. One is that we announced Red Hat OpenShift virtualization, which we had a fully managed virtualization tile in the IBM Cloud Catalog. And we also launched Red Hat AI Inference, and we've had Red Hat AI as an add-on to our platform for quite some time. But this is a standalone service that makes it super easy for enterprises or any user to come in and run their inference workloads. It's kind of covers up all of the complexity of having to pick which GPU you want to use, or what's kind of interesting too is I talk to clients and they're hoarding GPUs, or they're having political battles over who gets the GPU, and then they're over provisioning those GPUs because they don't want to give them up. So if you're using an inference service, what you could do is kind of eliminate that. You only pay for what you use. You can scale up, and then you don't have to fight your colleagues for the GPU. So hopefully, it provides a little bit of world peace in the corporate world as well.
Bring a truce to the battles.
Exactly. But so we're super excited, and that is a really fun. I run both product and design, and that product is an award-winning design. It's a Red Dot award-winning design, so we're really excited to just add another component to it and make it super easy to use, because I think if we can make the user experience really accessible to more people, they can unlock, the benefits of AI, and they can really do transformative things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's so interesting that, I've heard about those battles playing out, of course, in like the big AI labs. It's sort of interesting that battle's now everywhere, where it's like, these are my GPUs, you can't touch them.
It is. I love hearing about these stories, and how folks are kind of it's almost like you're a startup and you're pitching your idea, and like, is my idea worthy of these GPUs? So I think it's a healthy competition, but it's also really fun to hear about sometimes.
Brianna, what last question maybe for you is, I understand you look after both product and design. And the word design, I think, here is so interesting. I come out of the AI space where it's just like, well, once the model is big enough and powerful enough, it'll just solve all the problems, which is, I think, very much like not a design way of thinking about the problem. And so kind of curious, as someone who's in the space, leading this team, kind of trying to think about where things are going, what do you think is happening on the design of these systems? Like, what are the trends we're going to see in the next 12 months?
So, I think 12 months is pretty hard to predict, to be honest.
Sure.
I think it's a month by month.
It'll be flying cars, and who knows where we'll be at that point. So, yeah.
Exactly. But I do think, when we think about design, I think sometimes a lot of folks kind of hone in on visual design, or maybe that you're designing a new feature, but they're forgetting that we really need to design experiences. And so really everything, the world is going to start to expect agentic user interfaces, are going to expect that, information is very easily accessible, and that AI helps them complete tasks. So each product that we develop is really going to have to be designed to get the best out of AI. And that will take some, design experts to think through that user experience and make sure that the right data and metadata is being exposed so that you can get the right output. And so I think that we have to just make sure that we don't forget that, design is more important than ever, because the expectation of the world is changing drastically. And so for all products, for all software, for all SaaS, the bar is going to get higher. And so I think, design is more important than ever.
Brianna, well, thanks for taking the time. I know you're in the middle of this conference. Appreciate you spending a little bit of a few minutes here with us at MOE, just giving us the latest on what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to you listeners. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can get us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast platforms everywhere. And we'll see you all next week on Mixture of Experts.